Hello, welcome back to another Unity tutorial. In this episode of Voxel Heist, we'll be looking at some more of TextMeshPro, expanding on from our last episode. However, to begin this episode, we'll be looking at the task that was set last week. To go over the task that was set last week, we can open the door by pressing this button, and the button updates. This was a rather simple script where we had just essentially copied our active in hierarchy check and we just changed the button text. For a more optimized version, we can just plug it into the same check, but whatever's easiest for you. And I mean, as long as it works and you don't get any errors or bugs, then it's fine. So again, in the last episode, we created our first user interface using Unity's canvas system. But right now, the UI is quite kind of static. It does change, but not in the best way to show off TextMeshPro itself. Games need UI that react to the game world, like objectives, notification, and interaction prompts. So today we'll be learning how to update our UI dynamically using TextMeshPro and C#. So what I'm going to do is create a new script. This will be called ObjectiveUI. And we can open this and get rid of all of the default. Make sure that we're using TextMeshPro. And we're going to add a private TextMeshPro GUI objective text. However, you can see that it's private, whereas we'll want to actually define it in our inspector. So what we can do is do two squared brackets and type in SerializeField. This will make it so that the actual TextMeshPro GUI will appear on our script when we add its component later. I'm going to create an empty game object and I'll call this Objectives Manager and make sure that our Objective UI is dragged onto it, and I can grab our objective text and drag that onto it as well. So going back into Objective UI, we will do a public void and we'll call this SetObjective. This will actually take in a string, which will be our new objective. And we'll make sure that we set objective text dot text equal to objective and our new objective that we pass in through the variable. So we're creating a method that will change the text. Now different systems in our game can call this when objectives change. So for example, if I go to keypad, I can go in here, create a start. Again, this is just as an example. I can reference Objective UI. Actually, before that, I'll show you a referencing thing called a singleton. So, to set up a singleton, well, actually first, what is a singleton? A singleton is a class which only allows one instance of itself to be created, and that then allows us to have better access to this one system, which is good for managers, which our Objective UI technically is. we can do this like so. We will create a public static objective UI. We will call that instance. Then we'll go to an awake function. Remember, this is called before start, and we'll populate it like so. So if instance is equal to null, then instance will be this version of our script. Otherwise, if it can find an already existing instance, we'll destroy this so that there aren't multiple copies. So imagine we have one in our game already. That will run through awake and set this to the instance because there's no other one that exists. Then if somehow there were a second version of this script running, it'll go through, find the instance that exists, and destroy that second instance itself. So with that done, I can now head back over to keypad, and this will actually allow us to go into the instance that exists and set the objective. I'll do interact with the keypad, and I'll remove reference to the objective text and also update this existing one. So that is objective completed. So now we have a kind of hub for all of our updates for our objectives. And I think through that we can also get rid of the objective text reference there. So nothing appears to have changed. However, if I press play, we've set the objective twice. But if I interact, we can see that we have completed our objective. And that is because we're already stating our objective in the Objective UI here. What is quite fun about the string and text management within Unity, we're able to use something called rich text formatting. I believe it is similar to maybe HTML, but do not quote me on that because it's been a while since I've coded in HTML. However, what we can do is like so. So I can define the start with greater and less than symbol, type in color, and we'll say this equals yellow, just for our example. And at the end, so that it knows to stop coloring the text, we can just do /color in similar crocodile less than and greater than symbols. So heading back over to Unity, if I go ahead and press play, you can see that our objective is now set to yellow. We can carry on tweaking this, and if we go into the keypad, we can do a similar thing in here. So color equals, we'll say red, and close that off. Now if we head back to Unity, go ahead and press play. There we go. So we can interact with the keypad and our objective is complete. Another thing we can do is essentially toggle if our UI is being shown. So we've gone through some toggles in the past, but we can just do show objective, bool, we'll set that to visible, and do objective text dot game object dot set active is visible. And just to demonstrate this, we'll do a public bool is visible, and we'll have an update just running show objective is visible. So now heading back over to Unity, if I click on the Objectives Manager and press play, so we can see that we have our little on or off button here. we can now show our objectives. So I'm showing these kind of base level mechanics, I guess, just to show how powerful they are, because in essence, what we're doing with this toggle is later down the line, or maybe next episode, I'm thinking, that can be a pause menu. So when we toggle this, it could be that we bind this to the escape key on my keyboard, and we freeze the game and then show some UI. Or we're in a main menu and we click a button, but that takes us to, for example, our options. So we hide the original menu and show the options menu. This is quite a, I guess, powerful thing that I want to get across. Another cool thing that we can actually do with our new objective setup is for showing the player the different interaction keys that are available to them. But for this, we'll have to move our start from the keypad and take this into our player controller. Again, just as an example. So I believe I should be able to get string, we'll say key, and see if we can get our interact input action reference. That will be action and get binding display string. So now I can do press key, and if I want to color code the key, I can do string.format, and this will allow me to edit variables that are placed into string.format. So I can grab it with 2 curly brackets and the number 0. So this will take in key, and for example, if I had another variable, I could have another curly brackets and 1, and this will reference the variable in the next position, remembering that we are starting with an index of 0. I can then do color equals, say green for this one. Doing the American spelling of colour as well, I forgot to point out. And quickly, just a few things to go back over. I've sorted out the grammar in my set objective, and also I've put a 0 in the get binding display string, as without it, it will put in every possible binding for it. However, we'll just be taking the first one, which I believe is set to keyboard. So now, if I head back over, we should hopefully see, yes, objective, press, hold E. I think that is based upon the actual information from within, so I can actually just get rid of press at the start. So now it will be objective, hold E on the keypad. And we have our objective completed. As well as our little button still doing not really much down there. So now we have your task for next episode. When we interact with the keypad over here, you can see our door disappears, but if I carry on walking, we get a new objective, break into the vault. Now this is going over a couple of things that we've done in previous episodes, so be sure to give those a watch if you don't immediately know how this was done. But what I can show you is that we have a second door here with its mesh renderer off and its box collider set to is trigger. And I think that's all the info you're going to get from me on this one. But I'm going to wrap the episode up here. Thank you all so much for watching. Please like and subscribe, and check out the links in the description box below. And I'll see you next week. Bye.